One of the things in which the Korban Pesach that was brought in Mitzrayim is different to the Korban Pesach, the way it's going to be brought in future generations, is the fact that by Pesach Mitzrayim they needed to take it, they needed to acquire it 4 days before shechting it, on the 10th day of the month. This is something that does not happen in future generations, even though a korban always needs to be checked for 4 days in advance before it's shechted. Nevertheless, in future years, we don't have this concept that you need to go ahead and acquire and get the sheep 4 days before the shechting that is on the 10th day of the month. Why, in fact, was the Pesach Mitzrayim taken 4 days before it was shechted? Not like Pesach Doire. So Rashi brings from the Mechilta, Hoyer Rab Masi ben Chorosh Omer, Rab Masi ben Chorosh said. There's a pasuk, it says, Whatever, Alayich, Hashem says, I've come to redeem you. It came the time for me to fulfill the promise that I promised to Avram that I'm going to redeem the children, but the Yidden don't have mitzvahs that they're involved in order to be able to be redeemed. As the pasuk says, Vat Eirim ve'Eria, the Yidden are naked of mitzvahs. So Hashem gives them 2 mitzvahs, Dam Pesach, the blood of Pesach, the Dam Milah, the blood of the Milah that they also had on that night. So obviously this is their schus. Says the Rebbe, we need to understand. Rab Masi ben Chorosh explained why Hashem gave them the mitzvah of Korban Pesach, so they should have mitzvahs to be involved in, to have that schus to be redeemed. But the question seemingly still remains. So why was it taken 4 days before the shechting, and why 4 days, not more, not less? That question seemingly was not answered. Furthermore, Reb Masi ben Chorosh seemingly is not speaking at all about when they were supposed to take or acquire that sheep. Reb Masi ben Chorosh is speaking about the blood of the Korban Pesach. He says he gives them that Hashem gives them the schus of the blood of the Korban Pesach and the Milah. Now, simply that would be referring to putting the blood on the doorposts, and so when was that going to happen? When are they going to be dealing with the blood of the Korban Pesach? That's only going to be after they shech the Korban Pesach, which is not 4 days before the Shechita. Rather, it's on Yudalad Nisan. That's when they're shechting the Korban Pesach in the afternoon. And then they're going to put it on the doorpost only after that. Says the Rebbe, even if one is to say, B'doichek al kol ponim, that being involved in the Dam Pesach could also be included in taking the sheep. So when Rab Masi ben Chorosh says that Hashem is giving them the mitzvahs of the blood of the Pesach, and he means by that also taking the sheep in advance of that, because that's the preparation for shechting the Korban Pesach. The question still is, what's Rab Masi ben Chorosh mentioning over here when he's speaking? The question was why the Korban Pesach was taken 4 days in advance. Why is he suddenly mentioning anything at all about the Dam Milah, that Hashem is also telling the Yidden about the blood of the Milah? Furthermore, the Dam Milah is something that does apply in future Korban Pesachs. In other words, this is not, we started off with why this Korban Pesach is unique and different to our other Korban Pesachs that is being taken 4 days before. Dam Pesach that Masi ben Chorosh is suddenly bringing is something that applies to other Korban Pesachs, that only someone that is circumcised could take part in the Korban Pesach. And in fact, even in Mitzrayim, if someone would have been circumcised before, he wouldn't have this mitzvah now either. So what's Dam Milah even doing over here? So there are Mefarshim that say that by Masi ben Chorosh mentioning this idea, that Hashem gives them 2 mitzvahs, mentioning Dam Pesach together with Dam Milah, that actually helps us understand why it's being done 4 days in advance. That is, it's to do with the bris. In other words, after the bris milah, one needed to wait 3 days before going out onto the journey, onto the way, because of the danger. As Rashi had told us already in Parsha Shmois, in the story of Moshe Rabbeinu circumcising the son, or needing to circumcise the son. And this is why the Yidden are having their bris on the 10th day of the month, so they should be able to be ready to go out of Mitzrayim. And now when it says that they also had the bris malu ba'oisei halayla, these Mefarshim now understand that as meaning, Rashi means it's the same night of when they're taking the Korban Pesach. So this is also, because the bris has to be done in advance, allowing them to 3 days and so on. This is also why the Korban Pesach is also taken on the 10th day of the month, so that the Yidden should be able to have both of these mitzvahs together. They're now going to have the blood of the Korban Pesach and the blood of the Korban Milah, and the blood of the Milah, Says the Rebbe, but this is very difficult. This pirush to say that they had the bris on that night, Rashi means the night when they needed to take the Korban Pesach, meaning on the 10th day of the month, says the Rebbe is tzarech iyun gadol. Because Rashi says clearly that the Dam Milah was together with the Dam Pesach, the blood of the Pesach, which again, we said the blood is only going to happen a few days later of the Korban Pesach. Rashi brings the pasuk mizboiseses b'damoyer. The Eibishter sees the Yidden seeped in blood. Rashi explains it as meaning two bloods: the blood of Korban Pesach and the blood of Milah. Now, the blood of the Korban Pesach is definitely happening only after they shech the Korban Pesach, meaning after Yudalad when they shech the Korban Pesach. So the dam Milah then, if it's b'oisei laila, that means the night of Tezvav Nisan. The Rebbe now moves on to the next part of the Rashi. Rashi continues. The Yidden were completely immersed in Avodah Zarah. Amar lahem, so Hashem is telling them, Mishchu ukchu lachem, draw away, pull yourselves away, and take for yourselves. Now simply this is referring to draw and acquire the Korban Pesach. But Rashi is explaining based on the Medrash that it means Mishchu yidechem, pull yourself away from Avodah Zarah and acquire for yourself sheep of mitzvah. Now the Rebbe asks, this ending of Rashi is not the words of Rab Masya ben Chorosh, which Rashi was just quoting until now. Rather, this is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer HaKapor in the Mechilta, in the same place, who's actually arguing with Rab Masya ben Chorosh. In other words, Rab Masya ben Chorosh was just saying the Yidden didn't have any mitzvahs. Rabbi Eliezer HaKapor says the Yidden had mitzvahs. Rabbi Eliezer HaKapor says the Yidden had 4 amazing mitzvahs. He speaks over there about the fact that they didn't change their language and other things. They had 4 tremendous chusim, that each one of them in themselves are very, very powerful and great. So then the question is, if these are 2 different opinions, so Rashi should have said, Dovar Acher, another pshat, or V'yesh Oimrim, or a similar expression. When he says, Avav, Vishahoyu, and that they were seeped in Avodah Zarah, this almost sounds like it's a continuation of what Rab Masya ben Chorosh was saying. The Rebbe says that we also see over here a very clear example to a klal, to a rule that the Rebbe emphasized many, many times, that when Rashi brings in his Pirush a Maimer Chazal in the name of someone, it's always going to be for a particular reason, because by knowing who is the one that said it, that's somehow going to add some explanation to the thing that's being taught, which is relevant to Pirush Rashi. The Rebbe says here it's very, very obvious. Rashi is bringing from the Mechilta these 2 Pirushim that we just said, one following the other. By the first one, he's saying, the one who said it, Rab Masya ben Chorosh, and then he continues in the same breath, almost as if it's one Pirush, and he doesn't bring who's the one that said it. Says the Rebbe, we must say that when Rashi brings Rab Masya ben Chorosh, it's not just to tell us, Dover b'shem Oimri, who's the one that said it, but clearly it's somehow going to help us understand his Pirush. And that's why it's important to know Rab Masya ben Chorosh said it, as opposed to the ending of the Rashi. The fact that they were seeped into the Avodah Zarah, there it's not relevant. Says the Rebbe, another thing we need to understand. Rashi doesn't only say that Rab Masya ben Chorosh said it, he uses a very interesting expression. He brings from the Mechilta, Hoya Rab Masya ben Chorosh Omer. It sounds like Rab Masya ben Chorosh used to say this. He said this all the time. How is that helping us in any way with our Pirush? In order to understand Rashi's Pirush better, why is it relevant to know that this is something that Rab Masya ben Chorosh said very often? Says the Rebbe, the explanation of all of this is, when Rashi does say this ending of the Rashi, Vishahoyu shtufim, that they were seeped into Avodah Zarah, and not Dovar Acher, that it's a new Pirush, it's actually because al derech hapshat, which is the way of Rashi, we have the problem that we just said before. In the words of Rab Masya ben Chorosh, there is actually not an answer, no explanation for the original question of why the Korban Pesach was taken 4 days before it needed to be shechted. And as we said, Rab Masya ben Chorosh, in fact, when he starts explaining, he starts speaking about the Yidden being involved in 2 mitzvahs, the blood of the Korban Pesach, the blood of the Milah. He doesn't even mention anything about when the Korban was taken, the fact that it was taken 4 days in advance. So what happened to the answer of that? Says the Rebbe, the answer to that original question is actually in the end words of the Rashi that we just mentioned. That they were seeped into Avodah Zarah, and that's why he's telling them, pull yourselves away from the Avodah Zarah and take sheep of mitzvah. What does this mean? What this is telling us is that not only that in order for Yidden to be deserving to be able to go ahead and take the Tzon Shel Mitzvah, they first need to remove themselves from the Avodah Zarah, because otherwise you just can't eat from the Korban Pesach. Someone that serves Avodah Zarah can't eat from the Korban Pesach, but it goes much further than that. What he's saying is that with this itself, by taking the Tzon Shel Mitzvah, that's the way you're going to completely remove yourself, so completely nullify your connection to Avodah Zarah, the fact that you were so immersed in Avodah Zarah, as we'll discuss more later. And in order for that to really be proper, that's why it was needed that they had to have this sheep, they had to take it 4 days in advance before the Shechita. That was all part of completely removing themselves from Avodah Zarah, again, as we'll soon see. However, what Rashi is telling us now is a certain introduction to be able to appreciate all of this. And that is, the main point of the Korban Pesach Mitzrayim, according to the simple psukim, is, as its name implies, Pesach is so called because of the dilug, the Sicha, the jumping, the skipping. That is, that the blood of the Pesach was a sign, so to speak, that Hashem is going to skip and jump over the Yiddish houses, etc. Now, what is all of this connected with the fact that the Yidden were seeped into Avodah Zarah? In order to help us understand this, Rashi first brings what Amasya ben Chorosh said, that the main point of the mitzvahs that Hashem is giving Yidden before the Geula is in order to remove that concern that we had before of Va'at Eirim, the area that the Yidden are completely naked of mitzvahs. So they should have now mitzvahs in order to have the schus to be taken out of Golus. Now, since he gives them 2 mitzvahs, Hashem gives them 2 mitzvahs, Dam Pesach and Dam Milah, it's understood that the main point of the Korban Pesach regarding removing this idea that they're naked of mitzvahs, etc., is not so much the positive aspect of Korban Pesach, meaning that we're going to shecht it and eat it, etc., but it's more something to do with removing something negative. As the Rebbe will soon explain and elaborate more. But first, the Rebbe first looks at the idea that Hashem gives them 2 mitzvahs. When we look at this idea that Rav Masya ben Chorosh says that Hashem gives them 2 mitzvahs because Yidden were in a state of At Eirim area, there's the following difficulty. Why specifically 2 mitzvahs? Either way you look at it, there seems to be a problem. If we want to make sure the Yidden aren't naked of mitzvahs, then seemingly 1 mitzvah should be enough. If, on the other hand, according to the Anhaga, there's a mitzvah kisira, oroim v'chisisa, you see someone naked, you should cover him. And Hashem wants to give them more garments, so to speak, to cover themselves, more merits, more mitzvahs, then why only 2 mitzvahs? So says the Rebbe, the explanation is that each one of these 2 mitzvahs are actually removing another aspect, another problem of this state of At Eirim, the area that the Yidden are naked of mitzvahs. In other words, Yidden were faced, or they had a double problem, and these 2 mitzvahs are going to deal with each one of them. On the one hand, what they were lacking was in the positive, and asay toiv, in the fulfillment of mitzvahs. And therefore, if you're missing in positive, how can you be approaching Matan Torah? The Pasuk says you're going to be leaving Mitzrayim and Tavdun es Elokim al Har, serving Hashem at this mountain, receiving the Torah. That's the schus for which they're going out of Mitzrayim. That's one aspect. The second aspect is they have a problem with Sur Meirah. They had the evil, the klipa of Mitzrayim really stuck to them, the Ervas Haaretz, the lowliest place on earth. And therefore, even if they're going to have some mitzvahs, some positive things to be involved in, but if you didn't remove all of the bad of them, so they cannot be redeemed, meaning they can't be completely taken out of Mitzrayim. Technically, they can be going out of Mitzrayim, but the evil, the klipa of Mitzrayim is still inside of them. We need to somehow uproot that evil. And this is why they're given 2 mitzvahs. One mitzvah is going to accomplish the Asay Toiv, and that's going to be Dam Milah, because this is making the covenant with the Eibishter, the bris with Hashem. That's Dam Milah. The other mitzvah is more about the Sur Meirah, to remove the Ra of Mitzrayim, and that's going to be Dam Pesach. Again, as we'll soon see more in detail. Says the Rebbe, that will also help us understand that Amasya ben Chorosh and Rashi brings this lashon that what are the Yidden being given? Dam Pesach, the blood of the Pesach, to be doing this mitzvah in order to be redeemed. Seemingly, isn't the main point of the Korban Pesach, and also in Pshut Shemikra, mainly eating the Korban Pesach. In fact, we see this even when the Yidden are told to take the set, to take that sheep. They're told, take 1 sheep per household, make sure there's enough people for each sheep. In other words, every person has to have enough to eat, etc., etc., and only people that can eat. If a person is sick, then he can be counted, and so on and so forth. So why are we emphasizing Dam Pesach? But the Rebbe says, based on what we're explaining now, we're going to explain in a minute more, we're going to understand this because Dam Pesach is specifically the blood of the Korban Pesach, which is going to emphasize this idea of removing the bad of Mitzrayim. In other words, rather than the Asay Toiv, it's more about negating the evil of Mitzrayim and removing ourselves from that. So how does this all work? How is Dam Pesach connected to Sur Meirah? Another thing, says the Rebbe, if in fact the Yidden didn't have mitzvahs, so we would assume that the mitzvahs that they're being given are going to be very, very general mitzvahs. So mitzvahs, Mila, we understand. It's not a specific, only one mitzvah. It's a very, very general mitzvah. This is the sign between Hashem and the Yidden. So we must say that Dam Pesach also is accomplishing something very, very, very major in the area of Sur Mirah. How do we see this? And this is what Rashi tells us in the next part of the Rashi. That they were immersed in Avodah Zarah. And Hashem is telling them, remove yourself from the Avodah Zarah and take the Tzon Shel Mitzvah. In other words, that Pesach was coming to be mevatel, the fact that Yidden were completely immersed in Avodah Zarah. Not only they were serving Avodah Zarah, they were completely seeped and immersed in it. And we're speaking about in Avodah Zarah, not just anything no good, not just any evil, Avodah Zarah. So what's this idea? Says the Rebbe, we learned already in Parshas Va'era that the sheep were the Avodah Zarah of Mitzrayim. In other words, what's happening now is when the Yidden are going to be taking the sheep, which the sheep is the idol of Mitzrayim, for the purpose of a shachtoy, so they're eventually going to be shechting it, that itself is now removing them from Avodah Zarah. And furthermore, not only are they removing themselves from Avodah Zarah, they're going to be slaughtering it, they're going to be shechting it. This is obviously going to be completely removing them from being immersed in Avodah Zarah, as we'll soon see more. Says the Rebbe, now we can also understand why it's taken 4 days in advance. Since Yidden served Avodah Zarah, but unfortunately not just one time, but they were shtufim be'elilim, they were completely absorbed in it. So we needed to do something to completely uproot this deep connection. So if they would just take the sheep and immediately shecht it, that's a one-off, just a one-off thing. So then you can't say that that's enough to really remove them from being so deeply involved with Avodah Zarah. It's specifically by having the sheep, the Avodah Zarah of Mitzrayim, for a period of time. And it's all for the purpose that at the end of this period we're going to shecht them. That could remove this previous strong association with Avodah Zarah. And this is why it's taken 4 days in advance. And the Rebbe explains something very interesting. We find earlier in the story of the Akedah, the way Rashi explains it, that when Hashem shows Avraham Avinu the place of the Akedah, by Yom HaShlishi. Why does he show it to him by Yom HaShlishi on the third day? It was in order people shouldn't say that Hashem took Avraham Avinu by surprise. He was confused, and therefore he went right away ahead and shechted his son. If Avraham Avinu would have had time to think about it, and it wasn't just one quick impulsive thing, then maybe he wouldn't have done all of this. In other words, says the Rebbe, a sign that something is really being done in a very premeditated way, really thinking about it. That's only if you actually gave it time, and the Rebbe says you waited 4 days. Why 4 days? What happened by the Akedah? Avraham Avinu, Hashem shows him the place by Yom HaShlishi on the third day of his journey, but that's already a day. The journey started the next morning after Hashem told Avraham Avinu to take his child. Because he starts going only the next morning after he's commanded. So if it's on the third day of his journey, that means it's the fourth day from when he was actually told. And therefore, says the Rebbe, the same thing over here, that he didn't have these 4 days of preparing, shechting this Korban Pesach, and that in that way is really removing them completely from the inyan of Avodah Zarah. Says the Rebbe, in order for the Ben Chamish Lemikra, should be able to really appreciate even more what Rab Masya ben Chorosh is saying. That notwithstanding the fact that on the one hand Hashem promised Avraham Avinu that he's going to redeem his children, and yet he didn't need all of these mitzvahs in order to be involved in them so they should be able to have the Gula. For this, Rashi brings the name Rab Masya ben Chorosh. And not only that, Rashi says, as we said before, Hoya Rab Masya ben Chorosh. This is something that Rab Masya ben Chorosh would say all the time. He would constantly say this to his Talmidim. This drasha of that the Yidden needed these mitzvahs in order to have the Gula. Because this is actually going to be an explanation on his own continued conduct. Rab Masya ben Chorosh's. How is that? The Gemara tells us in Sanhedrin that the yeshiva of Rab Masya ben Chorosh was in Rome. In his days there were plenty of other yeshivas, also in Eretz Yisrael. But his yeshiva, his Beis Din, which was actually the biggest of the time, was specifically in Rome. Now seemingly, why would he make his yeshiva in Rome? This is something that would have caused that people would have come to Rome to be in his yeshiva. The Gemara actually says on the pasuk, tzedek, tzedek tirdav, you should be pursuing, running after justice. The Gemara says you should follow the Chachamim to their yeshivos. The Gemara gives examples. Follow Reb Masya ben Chorosh to Rome. Why doesn't he make it in Eretz Yisrael? In the same Gemara that speaks follow Reb Masya to Rome, the Gemara says follow Rabbi Akiva to Bnei Brak. So why doesn't he go to Eretz Yisrael? And why specifically Rome? Says the Rebbe, this is what Reb Masya ben Chorosh is teaching. He would constantly be sort of comforting his Talmidim for the fact that they're in Rome, by telling them that the Geula is dependent on the fact that we take a state, a situation like Rome, and we make that into a yeshiva. Let's find a Yid over here that's in a Rome type of state, Eirin Varia, completely naked from holiness, and we're going to make that he should be no longer a Roman, but someone that's sitting and learning in yeshiva. This is similar to what we said before, that the Eibishter wants that the Yidden should have mitzvahs lihisasig bohem. And this becomes Rav Masya ben Chorosh's involvement, that he gets that every single one of these Yidden should be involved in mitzvah, should be involved in yeshiva. And it's for this purpose that he has his yeshiva in Rome in the place of Golus, to help those kind of Yidden and in that way bring the Geula. Says the Rebbe, from here we have a Hira to our days. Being in the depths of Golus, of this last Golus, Golus Roimi, the Golus of Rome, knowing by the Psak Chazal that say that already back in the time of the Gemara, Kolu Kolakitz and all time limits are all up already. Yidden say, Yidden argue. We're in Golus close to 2,000 years. Viful the Shir. How much more the Yidden should be suffering in Golus? Tells us Rashi. If it was only about going out of Golus, of course we would have gotten rid of Golus long ago. But the Eibishter wants, Hashem wants that our going out of Golus should be not in the way of Eirim Ve'eria, being naked of mitzvahs. Hashem wants we should have mitzvahs and so on. And just like by Yetzias Mitzrayim, when the Yidden had the promise, Yidden are going to have great wealth. And the Yidden argued that they're ready to give up, to forgo all of this great wealth, as long as to go out of Golus quicker. But Hashem wants we should go Beruchush Gadol, with all of the different Pirushim on Ruchush Gadol, which includes obviously spiritual Ruchush, the Nitzoitzes, the sparks, the mitzvahs, etc. Says the Rebbe, the same thing is true by the Geula Hasidah B'Kariv, which is similar. It says, that the Geula is going to be similar to Yetzias Mitzrayim. We're going to see such amazing miracles. Hashem wants we should go out with all of the wealth, with all of the Pirushim as just mentioned. Says the Rebbe, here we also have one of the Ramazim, one of the hints in the Parsha for the Yom Hilula of the Frierdiker Rebbe on Yud Shvat, whose Istalkos was on Shabbos Parsha's boy. And the Rebbe says about the Frierdiker Rebbe, that the Rebbe put in all the effort himself in spreading Torah and mitzvahs to the extent of Mesiras Nefesh, and spreading mitzvahs ma'asis, the fulfillment of mitzvahs in action to every kind of Yid, and to be involved in it, like the Lashon we said before, that they lihisasik, to be really involved with each and every one of the Yidden, has known many, many stories about this. And in a way, as the Frierdiker Rebbe himself says in a Sicha, it says, Kisira oroim v'chisisi, you see a naked person, you need to cover him up. And don't hide from your own flesh, from your own relatives. And the Frierdiker Rebbe translated that as meaning that when you see a Yid that's naked from tzitzis, he doesn't have tzitzis, he doesn't have tefillin, v'chisisa, you should cover him, meaning bring him these mitzvahs. This is similar to what Rav Masya ben Chorosh says on Va'at Eirim Ve'eria, that Hashem gives them these two mitzvahs, the Pesach and the Milah in that case. Here the Rebbe is saying about the Frierdiker Rebbe, who tzitzis and tefillin. And it's for this sort of avodah that where is the Frierdiker Rebbe? His yeshiva is specifically in Chutz La'aretz. It's in the place of Golus. And there itself, within the city, as to use the expression of the Gemara, Koil HaMoina Shel Roimi, in the place where there's the sounds of the multitudes of Rome. In other words, a place that's seemingly a very lowly place. And yet, at Davka in this place, we go looking for the Yidden that are naked of mitzvahs and give them one mitzvah, two mitzvahs to be involved in, and ever increasing in light. Because since the Geula of this last Golus, not one single Yid will remain in Golus, so we need to make sure to find every single Yid, no matter where they are, and to make sure that they at least have one mitzvah, not to be naked, because that's what the Geula of all of Klal Yisrael is dependent on. And by us going in his paths, Netzach Sel Avoid forever and ever, in this way, then that will bring immediately, again, using the words of Rashi, Kadesha Yigolu, that the Yidden should have the Geula of Kitzuv Ranu Shechne Yofer, and those that are lying in the dust will get up and sing, Tchias HaMesim basically. For who besoichem along with him, B'meheira v'yameinu mamash.